Hello, everybody. My name is Maurice Button. I'm the CEO of City and Financial Global, and I'd like to welcome you to the latest in our series of speaker interviews. It's a great pleasure to have with us today Annette Nazareth, who's chair of the board at the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. And Annette will be speaking at our forthcoming summit, the International Carbon Market Summit, being held here in London on the 30th of October. Annette, welcome.
Thank you so much. I welcome the chance to chat with you today.
It's very nice to speak to you. Let's turn to our first question, if we may. What is the potential of the voluntary carbon market, and how are you planning to address problems in it and maximize its potential?
Well, thanks for that question. Before I start, I hope you'll indulge me when I say something that you obviously already know. The fight against climate change is truly an enormous task. It's a shared goal that transcends markets and sectors, portfolios and geographies. And it's crucial not just for the stability of our economies and financial markets, but to protect the future of our society and our communities. The scale and urgency of the climate crisis demand that we fully utilize every available tool. And we all know emissions reductions are the centerpiece of this. First and foremost, we have to have decarbonization by corporates in their own operations and in their supply chains. But unfortunately, it's too late for us just to rely on that, or even government action. We need, as Secretary General Antonio Guterres has recently said, to use every tool in the toolbox, everything, everywhere, and all at once. So it's becoming increasingly important that, in addition, we accelerate our transition to net zero by investing in high-quality projects across the globe that can reduce and remove greenhouse gas emissions. So we believe that the voluntary market can be a very important solution, but only if it's rooted in high integrity. It holds the power to unlock urgently needed finance that would not otherwise be available for projects that would not be viable without it. And to quantify the opportunity, the World Economic Forum projects that the voluntary carbon market could remove 2.6 gigatons of CO2 by 2030, and Morgan Stanley projects that it could reach around $100 billion in volume by 2030. As you know, today it's around $2 billion. But today, the quality of credits being traded in the market is inconsistent. And this is a real problem. Trading is fragmented and opaque. Not all carbon crediting programs impose the same high quality standards. And ultimately, it's fair to say that the voluntary carbon market doesn't consistently deliver on its promises. It doesn't meet the expectations of purchasers or the urgent needs of our planet. So this is a really significant problem, and it creates a lack of confidence in the market. And obviously, with a lack of confidence, we have an inability to reach the full potential with the voluntary carbon market to meet our climate goals. So that's where we come in with the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, which we call the ICVCM. We want to aim to maximize the potential of the voluntary carbon market as a climate solution, but again, emphasizing only if it is rooted in high integrity.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that introduction to your work and the importance of the fight against climate change and how the voluntary carbon market can help. I mean, I suppose at the center of what you're doing at the ICVCM are the core carbon principles and the assessment framework. Could you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. Well, our North Star, as you can imagine, is our core carbon principles. They aim to define internationally what a high quality carbon credit should look like. And the principles fall into three categories, those that relate to emissions impact, to governance, and to sustainability. It's essential that buyers have confidence that carbon credits are making a genuine impact on emissions. Carbon credits have to fund reductions or removals that are additional. Obviously, that means that they would not have occurred in the absence of the incentive created by a carbon credit revenue. They have to be permanent. They have to be measured robustly and conservatively, and they can only be claimed by one party. So obviously, we can have no double counting of credits. The programs that issue credits have to meet high standards of governance to ensure the overall quality of carbon credits. They have to provide comprehensive and transparent information on projects issuing the credits so that the public understands their impact on emissions, society, and the environment. They have to use a registry to uniquely identify and track each credit from issuance to retirement or cancellation. And the emissions reductions or removals have to be verified by independent third-party experts. But importantly, we think that the CCPs have broken new ground by requiring programs to ensure that high-integrity credits come from projects with robust social and environmental safeguards that also deliver positive sustainable development impacts, which means they make sustainable development a central part of the mitigation activity and not just a co-benefit. And they also have to support the transition to net zero and not lock in incompatible activities. Likewise, we have an assessment framework, and that's important because principles are one thing, but you need more specificity. So the framework sets out rigorous criteria that we're going to use to assess whether programs and categories of credits meet those criteria. The programs that we approve will be able to use the CCP label on credits, provided that those credits are also from categories that we have approved for the CCP label. So you'll need both the crediting program that has the CCP label and categories that have also been issued the CCP label.
Yeah, and if you've explained very clearly there that the rigor and the discipline of the process, which is admirable and I think quite impressive. But could you just explain a bit more about the categories of credits? What are those?
Well, we've designed an efficient process that's going to introduce the labels, as I said, as soon as possible. We have categories which have broken down. They're basically like methodologies. They break the carbon down into various types of activities, whether they're nature-based or technology-based, and they go into greater detail. So each of those categories, whether it's cook stoves or forestry projects or whatever, will be assessed. And the process that we're using to do the assessment, I think, is really quite rigorous. We're convening first internal and external experts in what we call a categories working group. And they're going to conduct an initial review of all the categories of credits. I think there are around 49 of them at this point. That we're looking at. And we're starting with a very thoughtful base, I believe. We've done a complete review of all of the scientific literature that's available and are starting with that. And then our internal and external experts are going to do the following. They're going to, in this category working group, break the categories down into 3 different buckets. One is, what are those categories that we think are the most likely to receive the CCP label? Those are going to be fast-tracked. And again, that's based on what we know about those types of projects today. Obviously, a lot of the categories will raise more complex issues that need deeper assessment, and those will be sent to multi-stakeholder working groups that are going to do a deeper assessment of each of those categories and to determine whether they get the CCP label. And finally, there'll be those that we think are just not ready for prime time, that we're not ready to consider them for the CCP label based on what we know today. So, and with the multi-stakeholder working groups, the other thing we're going to do is to try to prioritize that work by what is the current volume in the market today. Again, with the thought that if we can, come out with the CCP labels, both the approval of the programs and the categories with those that might have the greatest market impact first, that will enable us to accelerate the markets sooner rather than later. Because our hope is that we get through this process of the assessments by the end of the year, so that early in the new year we'll start to see credits that are issued with the CCP label.
It sounds like an incredibly comprehensive and deeply thought through process. And it is, as you say, just what's required to give the integrity back to the voluntary carbon markets at a time when there's been a little bit of negative press, hasn't there? Turning to the press, though, my last question, I think. There was an article in The Economist recently stating there were another 23 compliance carbon markets come in the pipeline, if you like, around the world, adding to the 49 that already exist. So how do you see the interplay between compliance markets and voluntary carbon markets? Do you think they're complementary, or do you think that compliance markets will, in the end, be the main way of dealing with this issue? But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, compliance markets are critical, obviously, and the voluntary carbon market, as you suggest, is really a complementary tool. So they're two sides of the same coin. And obviously, the more compliance markets and the more efforts by governments and regulators to reduce or remove, greenhouse gas emissions from the planet, the better. So we're obviously very supportive of that. But as you know, that's not enough. We, even taking all of these governmental efforts and commitments by corporates today is really not enough. I think we need to do even more. And so I think the voluntary carbon market has a very important role to play. It serves a distinct yet, critically important role. We're not competing with the compliance markets, as you may know. Our work at the ICBCM has our goal has been to create a voluntary compliance market that is as much like a regulated market as possible, so that if at any point in time governments or regulators decide that they do want to have jurisdiction over this, it'll be completely modular. They could take it over. We would, welcome cooperating with governments in any way, as we are now. We're doing a lot of we have a lot of interaction with governments and with regulators because we are seeking to be completely consistent and complementary of their efforts.
Yeah, very good. Sadly, Annette, our time has run out for this interview. So I'd just like to thank you very much for sharing those insights with us. I think it's an exciting time for the voluntary carbon market. And I think with the work of the Integrity Council, hopefully it's going to be widely used, and we'll see it reaching the levels that you mentioned at the start. So to our viewers, we'd very much like you to come along to the International Carbon Market Summit on the 30th of October in London, where you will hear from Annette and many other experts about the latest developments. So Annette, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maurice.